I am Karen Gustafson. I am the interim minister here to support this congregation through the transition from one settled minister to the next settled minister. I offer this introduction because I am mindful each week that there are people here who have never been here before, and sometimes the message is pretty much aimed at the work of this transition. I do always hope that there is a larger message here and that you will find it among the particulars. Last Sunday, some of you were here, some of you weren't. If you weren't, you should go on the website and listen to the sermon. But in short, last week I spoke here about the power of story, of truth in the multiple story of the same events, experiences, or feeling-filled relationship or historical moment. Particular strands of meaning that become embedded in a larger story whose power grabs like snags in the design of an unfolding tapestry or stitches dropped in a knitting pattern. What a beautiful tapestry, we hear. Yes, we say, but look here, this flaw, this off-colored thread. Look how it shows up again and again in the pattern. It's not quite right. The weaver must have thought that no one would note the substitution of this thread, and yet here it is. Look at this flaw. And sure enough, there it is, as true as the perfect sky over the intricately woven treetops, as true as the unicorn standing strong and free at the edge of the pond. Now that we see that errant thread, we find it drawing our attention while at the very same time we note the amazing quality of the whole. This is the work that we want others to behold. We invite others to see it, and inevitably, in the introduction, after the oohs and the ahs have subsided, it is almost impossible, in spite of the do not touch sign, to lift a quavering finger and point out the counterfeit thread. And yet, in spite of the exquisite and enduring beauty of the whole, in time, this tapestry might come to be known as the cloth of the errant thread. Now, I have heard that humans are hardwired to veer toward the negative. Our true stories around potential fear or harm or loss or offense have negative expressions of all kind, grounded in some sort of primal fight or flight from the dangers that threaten our survival, cause us to be wary of the goodness that we and others possess. And that wariness shapes our capacity to open our hearts to other minds and other possibilities. Those who manage to veer in the direction of possibility, of goodness, develop what we call resilience. Resilience is many things, but the two of them that seem most relevant in this moment as you endeavor to claim the new story that we lifted up last week for UCE is a willingness to remember the past in its wholeness and to intentionally and actively claim the informing legacies of the ministries that you have experienced, even in the face of loss and disappointment. So let's do that. The average tenure of a minister in the Unitarian Universalist Association is about 7 years, and this includes, of course, some large church ministries that have lasted for decades. I myself am guilty of altering that statistic by staying in the same place for 21 years. But regardless of the time that a minister stays, part of their influence becomes woven into the fabric of the life of the congregations they serve. UCE has many ministers, senior ministers, ministers of religious education, interim ministers, and interns. For better and sometimes for worse, the practices and traditions and personal styles that each of us brings are tried and hold, or tried and left. In any case, you who are, as the congregation carries the imprint of everyone you have called to accompany you on your journey. And so even as your strong lay leaders have held the center of who you are through all of these comings and goings, those legacies remain. So today, as a part of this particular transition time, I invite you to pause and remember some of the worth and value of your past ministers brought into the life of the UCE community that lives with you today, to claim with gratitude the larger story of these formative relationships. We will do this in two ways. One is, I will, in a moment, read the names of UCE ministers, past ministers, and the approximate dates of their tenure. And the members of the transition team, David Schroeder and Barbara Hoschel and Margaret Shackley, will lift up some piece of those legacies that continue to inform some of the parts of this congregation as you know it today. In many cases, you will recall things differently. But I will say that this exercise is not so much about accuracy as it is about story. The true story that ends with gratitude for the opportunities to have shaped into the beautiful, imperfect, dynamic tapestry that is this church, with the help of many professionals whose best hopes and intentions were always to leave you enhanced by their presence. And the second way that we can lift up these legacies that are shared during the service is that afterwards, when you are gathering for coffee or in the week ahead are here, there is an opportunity for you to write down your memories and gratitudes on Post-its and stick it on the pieces of paper that are over there on the west wall in the space designated for each of the ministers. It is our hope that we can harvest these in service of a more complete story. May this be a ritual of healing griefs and sorrows, and an opportunity for gifts to be claimed, stories made whole to receive in the time that lies ahead. Charles Eddis, 1966 to 1977.
Charles Eddis took the congregation forward with a growing impulse to get out into the community and make a difference in racial justice through advocacy for fair housing. We developed for ourselves an image as a social justice congregation. He modeled calm, collaborative leadership and accessibility.
Interim, Josiah Bartlett.
1978.
1978 to 1979.
Josiah Bartlett affirmed our place and value in the larger Unitarian Universalist movement.
Dave Sammons, 1979 to 1983.
David Sammons introduced the Serendipity Auction. He also continued efforts to get us out into the community for social justice, encouraging visibility with a nuclear weapon-free zone billboard on our ridge lawn. He also welcomed humor and offbeat Sunday service experience.
Carolyn Buss, 1978 to 1985.
Carolyn was our first ordained RE person, a minister of religious education. She was ordained during her tenure at UCE. She instituted our first organized curriculum-based RE program and our first strong adult ed program.
Roger Fritz, 1985 to 1993.
Roger Fritz established the Caring Committee and developed a model for lay pastoral ministry. He undertook to make UCE a teaching congregation with ongoing budgeting for interim ministers. He also began Joys and Concerns as part of the Sunday service and established the Sunday morning chalice lighting by sponsoring groups in the congregation.
Frank Robertson, 1986 to 1998.
Frank Robertson was our first intentional engagement of a minister of religious education, titled Associate Minister, after the arguing from years before about whether we could accept Carolyn Buss as a minister when she earned her ordination. We decided to step up into the leadership of the denomination and continue to engage the new idea of an MRE. Frank was also our first gay minister at a time when that was still a bold step. He supported women's groups and brought them into the congregation by using their worship ideas in the Sunday morning service.
Interim Ed Harris, 1993 to 95.
Ed Harris helped us talk about money. Through his influence, we ramped up the Canvas effort, which changed our financial culture. We began to step up to addressing the issue head-on of how we would finance this enterprise. Leadership level pledges were celebrated. All pledges were published without names to give us a graphic message that this church was financed by us, the membership.
Barbara Peskin and Ann Tyndall, 1995 to 2003.
Barbara and Ann brought us our first experience of co-ministry and were our first women ministers. They led us through the welcoming congregation certification process. They led the congregation in mission and vision development, resulting in our current mission statement. They established leadership for the women's programs at UCE in the 1990s.
Barbara Peskin, solo, senior minister 2003 to 2011.
Barbara Peskin strongly urged and supported work outside the church for social justice. She set an expectation for poetry and spirituality in sermons. Her continuing legacy includes the Covenant Group program, paid membership staff, and the Worship Associate program. She encouraged visibility in social action through the Civil Marriage is a Civil Right banner on the church building, and the first congregational resolution against the war in Iraq, and the certification of UCE as a peace advocacy congregation in 2012. She also initiated the concept of sharing the Sunday offering with community organizations.
Sue Cinnamon, 1999 to 2007 Minister of Religious Education.
Sue Cinnamon continued the strong and lively participation in religious education started by Frank Robertson. She established flexible programming to let parents come to church.
Interim MRE Nancy Schaefer, 2007 to 8.
Nancy Schaefer captured Sue Cinnamon's program in writing to make it available to extend it into the future.
Connie Grant, 2008 to 2015, Minister of Religious Education.
Connie Grant brought us the volunteer Christmas pageant, our Whole Lives curriculum, and children's worship services. She formalized a UCE philosophy for religious education and led the naming of the lower level rooms.
Brett Lorty, 2013 to 2018.
Brett Lordy managed a difficult choir director transition that brought us Vicki Hellier. He encouraged us to see other groups in our congregation that we had left out, members of military service, and those whose informed mythology includes an idea of God. Brett led the board to a fuller practice of policy governance and also led the establishment of a two-service Sunday morning. He hired Eileen Wiviot as Assistant Minister for Social Justice and Membership, thus modeling the potential for a good team ministry.
Interim Greg Stewart, 2018 to 2019.
Greg Stewart encouraged more intentional welcoming of newcomers and added the silent witness to loss in the joys and sorrows part of the service.
For these spoken legacies and all those woven too tightly to observe, we give thanks. And now Rob Geiger will transition us into our Red Communion.